Man, I ain't even started talking yet, and I already had to drop the ban hammer on a Twitch bot. Good morning.
Good morning. And they always seem to come from Twitch.
Oh yeah. In fact, I don't think I've seen them from anywhere else.
Anyhow, Steve is first in the chat. So
One of them is.
one of them is.
First blood. First blood.
Is it proper Steve or other Steve?
I won't say.
Right.
Never said.
So, let's just say good morning to Steve and also to Steve and to Krista and to Megan. Thanks for joining us this morning. So, yeah.
And, okay, so we've got this headline. And, guys, I pulled up the headline. I haven't even read the article yet. So we're gonna enjoy this together.
Oh, and Danny from...
Danny, good morning, sunshine.
Love our friends at Polytech. Can't really say enough good things about the people at Polytech. They've actually been very kind to us. And
they have.
They're good friends to have. So, yeah.
Oh, no. Steve, it wasn't a question of who posted first. It was a question of which one of you is proper.
Right.
So you're not wrong, but you ain't right. House GOP eyes probes of Afghan pullout, Fauci, Hunter Biden, if they win back majority. First, there is definitely a feeling in the zeitgeist right now that it looks like next year is going to be a big year for Republicans in the House and Senate.
It smells like 2010.
I was just about to say.
The last time Obama was in charge.
Think back to 2010, exactly. And that's something else that we need to hammer on. We need to keep reminding the Democrats of this, especially now that it looks like it's repeating. When Democrats get what they want, when they win what they want, they don't like it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, just a couple of things to touch on to frame this correctly, and then we move into it. The first is that Democrats cannot run on the specificity of what they're going to do on the issues. They can't, because as soon as they say, well, what we're going to do is raise your taxes and restrict your freedoms in order to solve the problem... Like, for example, we're just going to outlaw cows to deal with global warming. They lose you, right? They lose you. They can't run on the issues themselves because they lose.
Even if you were still dumb enough to vote for them, as soon as they tell you what they're actually planning on, they lose you.
Exactly. And then the other thing, and I will never, ever, ever forget this. It was probably very unprofessional on my part, but in another life, I ran an insurance debit. And that's one of those old school things where you run around and you actually pick up people's payments at their houses and stuff like that. Old school insurance. And
it's when you have the kind of clients that can't be trusted to pay their bills, so you have to go knock on their door every month.
Right. Anyhow, so I bumped into this landlord and was just chatting with him. And found out he was a Democrat. And continued to chat with him. And this was after Obamacare had been passed and had been the law of the land for a year or two. And this guy was like, well, I voted for Obama, but this is not what I voted for. And
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And I asked him, and it pissed him off real good. And I asked him, what did you think you were voting for?
And that's exactly the question you need to be asking every Democrat today with Biden in office. It's like, man, this $3.50 gas is bullshit. What did you think you were voting for? Right. He said that. Well, let's not forget, Obama too was one that before he was elected, he said that it'd be better if gas were more expensive.
Well, actually, Obama said that it was coal. That what he would do is he was okay with seeing a world where building new coal-powered plants was so expensive that the energy companies would just choose not to build any more coal-powered plants, which amounts to the same thing. Whenever you raise the price of energy, you're going to have a shock effect in the entire economy because, well, you got to have energy. You have to, right? So yeah.
Yeah, the economy is a delicate ecosystem. You can think about it like you go out in the woods and you manage to kill off all the, let's say, wolves. Pretty soon, there aren't going to be any leaves on the tree.
Right, because
there's nothing to kill the vegans.
That's right.
I mean the deer. That need to be eaten by wolves because it's the natural cycle of life. And I in no way meant anything about the total and social intolerability of vegans.
Yeah. No,
Although I'd be totally comfortable with waging war against the evil space vegans.
The evil space vegans? I don't...
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I'm not even going to ask.
That was for you, Larry Correa.
Okay. Yeah, you have thoroughly confused me.
That's okay.
I liked yesterday better.
That's a joke for a few people.
I like jokes that I can be a part of. Like, for example, Kamala Harris holding two dicks. Like, that was... I went and rewatched yesterday's episode, and it was funny again. And I was there. So, these jokes that I don't understand, and that's bullshit.
It's okay.
I'm your co-host.
Well, fair enough. Read more. So... This, we've got this from the Washington Times. It almost seems like a threat, and the Times is not Washington Post, but they're also not the New York Post. I guess they're the least one of the less far left radical propaganda outlets.
Sure.
Because remember, Fox is not your friend.
No.
So, House Republicans, who are increasingly confident they will take back the majority next year, yeah, you think? Say they will launch tough oversight investigations of the Biden administration and hold accountable Democratic lawmakers who abused majority rule against GOP members. This one, in a lot of ways, it's a no-brainer, but I am, of course, somewhat conflicted over the ideas. Congress conducting investigations.
You mean like into Steve Bannon, for example?
Right.
Over the coup that didn't happen?
Right.
Over the coup that wasn't?
Or into the January 6th situation, or, I don't know, Russiagate, Ukrainegate, anything else that was not just obviously, but provedly orchestrated intentionally with false evidence by Democrat operatives. And I don't mean people who I think are biased toward the... No. I mean by people who are employed by and paid by the Democrat National Committee for the express purpose of committing the specific crime of generating false evidence to make illicit, false criminal accusations.
Dan Burke says the failed FBI opposition January 6th. That's fantastic.
And I suspect that opposition was a typo, but
I'm choosing to
believe
because the A's right next
to the S, but
I'm choosing to believe that was on purpose.
But we're running with that.
That's a fantastic comment.
I'm gonna write that one down. We're gonna use opposition.
Well, I understand your issues with using Congress to investigate people, and I actually share them, and I might even have more opposition than you to it, okay? But let's go a little further in this article. Let's see what the specific details are, because this could just be a nothing burger, right?
But So, Republicans told the Washington Times they will launch a series of committee investigations, including digging into the Justice Department's coordination with the White House to investigate parents protesting their school boards, the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and issues related to Hunter Biden, President Biden's son. Okay, before we get too much further, let me say this about the school boards thing. What the Justice Department did was not coordinate with the White House to investigate parents protesting their school boards. Honestly, I suspect the Justice Department never intended to actually conduct any investigations. Instead, what they did is the Justice Department, at explicit direction from the Biden administration, drafted letters to create headlines to tell America that all of the parents in this country who are bothered by the school trying to take their children away. And we're going to talk down the slippery slope argument for a minute real quick on this. Because the objective of the public school system, the government public school system, is not to indoctrinate your children. That's what they're doing right now. That's the current activity. The objective is to stop American citizens from raising children at all. The objective is something more akin to a Brave New World situation where the child is taken at birth and from birth is conditioned to be a party operative.
That's right.
That will never ever be anything except for the very specific professional assignment that they are given at birth.
Yeah, you are a beta, and you will always be a beta, but thankfully you're a beta plus, and you will be grateful for being a beta plus. You will only ever associate with betas and alphas, because you are a beta. And if you haven't read A Brave New World, you should.
Terrifying.
And shit is trippy.
Because
it's incredibly pornographic for a book written so long ago.
Yes.
But it's also surprisingly accurate. Like, you really can just, like, put an entire population to sleep with endless entertainment and tons of drugs. Like,
and part of it is the rhetoric, too. In Brave New World, you have a very hard class system. Alpha, beta, gamma, right?
Delta and epsilons.
Yeah, deltas, epsilons. And at every level, like, we hear people in each of the different castes talk about being in the cast, and they'll say things like, I sure am glad I'm a gamma. I'm not dirty like those lower caste people. I live a much better life, and I'm way smarter than an epsilon. But while all those alphas and betas seem to have shiny houses and better toys, boy, they have to work really hard for it. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with all that responsibility, right? And like all up and down the level, they talk about their little logical, basically justifications for being happy where they were put. But you're also talking about people who were subjected for 15 years to subliminal programming, pain receptor associated education,
hypersexualized at a young age,
hypersexualization, actively encouraged to engage in open sex play in view of the public,
prepubescently
at 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah,
right. Not just prepubescently, but like, I mean, almost
4, 5, 6 years old,
almost pre-verbally.
Well, okay, look.
That's the objective. That's what the DOJ attempted to do. That's what Merrick Garland is attempting to build, is a world where your children are not raised by the parents ever at all. Likely, the eventual objective is that you will never even know who your parents were.
Yes. Basically, they are trying to take your children away, and that letter was meant to scare you. Kind of had the opposite effect. It just made people even angrier because, frankly, many parents have a problem with their children being taught that it's kind of like how the feminists say man bad, woman weak. Well, the critical race theories say white bad, black weak. And white and black people kind of have a problem with that. It's funny that. Okay, so I'm going to take over for you for just a moment here because I have a wheel and I have control issues and I have control partially. You bastard. Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, ran down a list of issues he would like to hit should Republicans get the gavels after next year's elections. Thousands of Americans' tax returns were made public. We better figure out how that happened, he said, referencing the disclosure of a trove of tax records of America's wealthiest people that was somehow obtained by the nonprofit investigative journalism outlet ProPublica. He also had Mr. Biden's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, in his sights. Dr. Fauci misled the country for over a year and a half. We need to figure out how that happened and what took place with the virus. Republicans on the Oversight Committee also want to investigate issues concerning first son Hunter Biden's artwork that has sold for six figures to unknown buyers.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little more too. And we've talked about that on the show before. Artwork, especially artwork that most people don't understand. You look at it and it's like, oh yeah, this is a $20 million painting. It sold for $20 million. It'd probably sell for $25 million in a year or so. And you look at it and you're like, I don't get it. And also, I've never heard of the artist, right? And I'm not just talking about like you who's not an art aficionado, the average American who doesn't spend a lot of time wandering around galleries and studying current artists. No. I'm talking about art that you see it and it's just, what is this?
It looks like somebody ate a bunch of paint and then threw up on canvas. What happened?
And what it is a value store.
Yeah.
The art doesn't actually have any value. It's a complex IOU system that's used to launder money for criminal transactions. You got a multi-million-dollar piece of art hanging on the wall because you didn't pay multi-millions for it. You traded several $1,000,000 worth of cocaine for it.
Yes.
And in a year or so, when your little guerrilla war band is ready to rise up against the local warlord in sub-Saharan South Africa, then you're going to trade it for a big crate of guns. And it'll get traded for a bunch of, sex slaves after that. And that's what this stuff's for. So another thing that is illicit that you're not allowed to sell globally under the laws of most countries is access and influence with the leadership, with the
politicians
president,
and their immediate friends and family. Yeah.
What is happening with Hunter Biden's artwork? If you believe for a moment that this isn't about buying access to Joe Biden, then you're naive beyond belief. And I suspect there's not a whole lot of anybody watching the show right now that has that suspicion.
Okay, so we're coming into the
Hunter's basically a printing press.
Yes. All right. So we're coming into the final segment of the show, and I'd like to bring it around because there's two parts to this. Okay. On the one hand, okay, Dr. Fauci is a piece of shit, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. And
those poor puppies.
Of all the things that would get people angry, of course, it's the probably legitimate scientific experimentation on puppies that gets them upset because it's puppies, right? You want to make somebody hate a villain, have the villain kill a dog. It's screenwriting 101, right? But okay, Dr. Fauci is a piece of shit. And obviously there's a whole mess of shady shit going on with Hunter Biden. Why else would the whole thing about his laptop and all the, the pictures of him smoking crack while hanging out with hookers that were possibly also maybe potentially his nieces and underage and all that mess, why would they have
At least
suppressed
he wasn't in the shower with his sister, Joe.
daughter? But yeah.
That would be Hunter's sister. The daughter that Joe was showering with
Oh,
would be Hunter's sister.
Oh, okay. All right. See, I overthought it. I understand now. Anyhow, but there's obviously...
Although it wouldn't surprise me to know that Hunter showered with his father in the same way.
Ew, okay, right. So obviously, Fauci's a piece of shit. Hunter Biden is a piece of shit. There's a whole lot there that needs to be investigated, okay? And I'm going to kind of reference something that, because Alex from Polytech has shown up in the chat. So good morning, Alex. We got a full Polytech in the house now. That's awesome. But he says Republicans ain't going to do shit. And
I'm sorry, Alex, but you're probably right.
Well, okay. But here's the thing. As soon as you start using the government to destroy your opposition, like, that's the kind of thing that happens in South American countries where it's like an open secret that their economy's backed by cocaine, right? That is not supposed to be the kind of thing that happens in what I'll refer to as a Western liberal democracy style of government. In the thing that we think of as civilization or society, where you have rights and you have the ability to be wrong, to be in the opposition, to be right and be in the opposition, to be in the minority and all that. As soon as you get to the point to where, and I said this about Trump going after Hillary Clinton, I thought that was dangerous territory, where if Trump won the election and trying to bring legal pressure against Hillary Clinton was dangerous, because that's when you start to go down that banana republic slope, where forever and ever and ever, you better win the election, because if you don't, you might go to jail or worse. And so, while I think it's legitimate in particular to investigate all this stuff with Hunter Biden, because there's just so much shit there. Fauci, we don't need to investigate Fauci. We just need to fucking fire him. Oh, and I dropped the F-bomb. I'm sorry. I did it. My bad. We're trying to do less F-bombs, and then I just blew it. Fauci, I think, just needs to be fired and humiliated. All that stuff where he goes on, like, Sesame Street and all that, that'll go away if he gets fired. Like, immediately. Right?
North Cuba, Z. Not South America. Well played, Steve. Okay, so on Hillary committed actual crimes that needed to be investigated and prosecuted. But then, once Trump was in the White House, we saw the Democrats conduct an absolute witch hunt. And it was worse than a regular witch hunt, where you've got a target and you decide that, like, think of the Red Scare, right? With the Red Scare, all of a sudden it was like, well, we see, these people, they see commies everywhere. And of course, we get a little further down the road, get some documents declassified. Turns out,
there were commies
McCarthy
everywhere.
Was right. There were commies freaking everywhere.
Yeah, there's your hot take. McCarthy was right about many of the things that he said. But look, I get what you're saying. Hillary was guilty, but the problem, the philosophical, the core issue here is, as soon as you start using government as a cudgel instead of the place where, because kind of the function of any state, we cede all violence, the violent authority. How's it? I've heard it put that we've given the state the monopoly on violence. Then that's why government comes from the consent of the governed, right? Because we've kind of entered into this contract where the ephemeral thing that is the government is the thing that is allowed to come to your door and kick it in and kill you if you don't comply. So as soon as we start using that power to go after our political opposition, even if it is correct in a technical sense, I mean, you can never put Pandora back in. Well, Pandora opened the box, so right. You can't ever put that back in the box.
I'll stuff that bitch back in her box. Anyway, here's where we are, though. Everything you're saying is correct about breaking that seal. about opening that box. And once Obama weaponized the IRS, probably before that, but it probably happened before that, but it was publicly visible once Obama had actively weaponized the IRS and got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. We no longer live in a nation that is ruled by the rule of law. We live now in a nation that is ruled by the rules of political lawfare. So we're in a state of open warfare between the two tribal distinctions, between the two parties. And one of the primary reasons that Republicans lose is because Republicans tend to treat politics like it's Marcus of Queensberry rules boxing. You know, we're gentlemen engaged in a
blood sport, but a blood sport with rules.
A blood sport, but a sport. Whereas Democrats treat everything like it is a street fight. They treat everything like it is a no rules, voter laws be damned, law generally be damned. There are no rules. It's perfectly okay and legitimate to lie, steal, cheat, kill, right? Like, for example, BLM protesters. It's totally cool, right? Like the defense's argument or the prosecution's argument for why Kyle didn't engage in an act of self-defense. He said sometimes you have to catch a beating. Whoa, hold on.
Wait a minute. So sometimes you just have to catch a raping, and sometimes you just have to catch a robbery, and sometimes you just have to catch a kidnapping.
Correct.
Right. Wait a minute.
That is the position of the prosecution in the Kenosha Kid case. That's not my opinion of their statements. He literally said, "Sometimes you have to catch a beating."
And I think his exact quote was, "Sometimes you have to take one on the chin."
He said that too,
and he meant it literally.
Yeah. But we'll get down that rabbit hole more.
I promise. We're going to go back to the Kyle Rittenhouse.
We want to hear the actual verdict before we do much more coverage on Rittenhouse. But where we are now is we've seen the Russia investigation. We've seen the Ukraine investigation. We're seeing the January 6th investigation, et cetera, et cetera. The door has been opened. The seal has been broken. There is no longer rule of law in this country. We've seen the Chauvin conviction. The fact that Chauvin was convicted in what was clearly a clean arrest attempt where the subject overdosed on drugs and just happened to die in custody.
Well, just the fact that Chauvin was convicted of both murder and manslaughter, it's like, wait, I'm kind of sure it's supposed to be one or the other.
Right. And the very idea that the Kenosha Kid is even facing a trial, right? Like maybe the most insidious piece of that narrative is the idea that that the Kenosha Kid defended himself and killed two of the three attackers. Two of the three attackers? Go watch that video. There were dozens, if not hundreds of people actively trying to murder that boy when he killed only two of the armed, violent, and explicitly stated and threatening assailants who attempted to murder him in the street with weapons ranging from fists through skateboards, chains, and a loaded gun. If there's any doubt in anybody's mind that Kyle was committing self-defense, you're stupid, and we don't need you here.
Okay.
But so we're seeing this. There is a point to that. Kyle's only being prosecuted for purely political reasons, just like the McMichaels brothers in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Just like go all the way back to Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, pure political witch huntery. What we have is a country whose legal system, whose justice system, whose law enforcement system has been hijacked by violent terrorists who are willing to mob and threaten law enforcement until the law enforcement uses their firearms to treat the political opposition in the way that the Democrat National Committee prefers. It's that simple. So if we manage to get Republicans in charge next year, and they do not pursue every line of serious misconduct that has been obviously committed by the Democrats for the last couple of decades, then you cannot in good conscience vote for those people again. And many of the ones that are going to be seeking re-election this time around do not deserve it, precisely because they have sat by and allowed this nonsense to occur. We are where we are right now because for decades, your choices have been you can vote for the evil man or the weak one. And you haven't had another option. You've had evil and you've had weak. And we cannot tolerate that any further.
I wish we'd gotten here sooner, because there's actually some room here, I think, to give you some pushback. A third option does occasionally present itself. We did get Trump. And what Trump did is he said, this is all bullshit. I'm just going to go manage it properly. And he did. He just went in and was like, look, this is dumb, this is dumb, this is dumb. Let's throw all that out. And then let's just let people go to work and work as much as they want and keep more of their own money. And wow, if it didn't just like solve so many of the problems. It's amazing to think that they spent the entire first 3 years of his presidency on a bullshit Russia thing, and then literally conveniently enough a brand new virus just happened to pop up to hobble the 4th year of his presidency. If you think about everything that Trump did despite all of that opposition, it's amazing. And so, and I say that to say that that is the option. And there's not a lot of Trumps out there, okay? And the 90% of the Republicans are weak at best. Absolutely agree. Your Jim Jordan types are in very short supply. All right, there's a whole lot more Liz Cheneys than there are Jim Jordans. But the problem is, okay, if we're going to engage with them in this level, why stop here?
Okay, so kind of to that point, and then and I also want to deal with Alex and Steve here. So I'm gonna deal with Steve first because I'm gonna deal with Alex a little bit longer, and we're gonna wrap it up pretty quick because we're 5 minutes over. But okay, so Steve says term limits take away perpetual re-election as a goal. I think Jordan Peterson actually says this one best. When Peterson talks about term limits, he says, "Listen, the best you can hope for when you're electing new people to power in a democracy is you take the useless, incompetent, evil people, and you vote for new, different, useless, incompetent, evil people. And the best you can hope for is the useless, incompetent, evil people that you vote in to replace the old ones are less entrenched, useless, evil, and incompetent, so that they are less effective with their evil and incompetence. Since they are less entrenched and their tendrils have not had time to infect as much stuff, then the best you can get is you can replace the entrenched, useless, evil, incompetent people with useless, incompetent, evil people who just don't have as far a reach to do as much damage yet." Now, back to Alex's previous comment. Republicans just voted in lockstep for the infrastructure bill, including Mitch McConnell. Yes, and that is aggravating as hell, and every one of them that voted for it needs to be voted out. I don't know if Jim Jordan's on that list or not. I suspect he's not. But even if he...
I'm gonna read Alex's comment to tee you up. He said, "We don't need to exact vengeance. We need them to fix shit, and that's the one thing they won't do."
Correct. And vengeance is not what I'm talking about. I'm glad you said that, Alex, and this is why I wanted to come back and deal with that comment. Vengeance is not what I'm talking about. The people that were involved in the obviously illicit, obviously orchestrated, obviously DNC-funded witch hunts like the Russia probe, the Ukraine thing, etc., it's not just about, there is some vengeance here, right? There is a certain catharsis in seeing people like Hillary Clinton get her comeuppance for the things that she did. But let's face it, the Clintons are not significantly relevant in world power anymore. They're both probably on the verge of dropping dead in the not too distant future, and they do not currently have actual elected hands on the levers of power. That said, they are both still very influential and therefore still a threat. So even when you're talking about the Clintons, who are kind of yesterday's bad guy, they're still a problem. But more importantly, forget the catharsis, forget the vengeance. Yes, I want to see the bad guys get their comeuppance. But right now, the majority of the bad actors involved in the crimes against this country that were committed in the pursuit of the Russia hoax and the Ukraine hoax, etc., are still in power. Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Nancy Pelosi, right? Kamala Harris.
Pat Leahy's going to retire. Before he just turns to dust.
But it's not about vengeance there, guys. The fact of the matter is that the people that are doing these terrible things are still in power and will continue to do these terrible things. I would love to see us get back to a place where what we have is the actual rule of law. But until it is the case that the people who are subverting the rule of law and using our government instead as their own political mechanism to conduct war intentionally against the people of this country for their own profit, then you cannot have the rule of law. And one of the many, many reasons on the very long list of why we do not and cannot currently have actual, legitimate, honorable, respectable rule of law is that we have an entire elite class that has been treated as if they are above and beyond the law, and having broken not the law itself, although they've done that as well, but more importantly, broken the rule of law and become therefrom immune, then there is no mechanism of accountability to prevent the evil, the enemies of our country, who are currently elected to power, from continuing to wage war on prosperity, liberty, and even life itself. The only thing that it takes for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And that's what we have. And I would go so far as to argue that where we should have good men who are currently doing nothing, the best we can find are mediocre men who are, basically I'm talking about the Republicans broadly. The best you can say about most elected Republicans is, well, he's not evil. In fact, basically the best you can say about most of them is they're ambivalent. They're useless. They're weak. And we need fresh blood.
I think we're long anyway, and that's a tough monologue to top. So,
all right, y'all be safe out there.
Good morning. Be safe.
We love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.